Welcome to Think and Talk Libertarian, the podcast where we challenge conventional thinking, question authority, and explore the ideas that define true freedom. Today, we're diving deep into what it really means to live in a culture of liberty. We're going to tackle some big questions. Is true freedom possible under a government that enforces laws and restrictions? Does democracy actually protect liberty, or is it just another form of control? And perhaps the most controversial question of all, is secession the ultimate expression of freedom? Strap in. This is going to be an eye-opening conversation about the philosophy of libertarianism, the lessons we've learned from history, and why secession might be a more important topic than you think. Let's start with the big picture. What is libertarianism? Libertarianism isn't just a political label, it's a philosophy, a way of life. It's about the belief that each person is sovereign, that no one has the right to control another person's life, property, or choices. Libertarianism stands in direct contrast to any system of governance that imposes rules through force, whether that system is a monarchy, a democracy, or a republic. Think about it. If liberty is truly an inalienable right, why do we need a government to give it to us? We've been raised to believe that government protects freedom, but when you break it down, what does government actually do? It enforces laws. It regulates behavior. It collects taxes. And if you resist, it punishes you. So how can something that relies on force ever be the protector of freedom? Libertarianism asks us to rethink everything we've been told. Instead of looking to politicians to secure our rights, we should be looking to ourselves. Freedom isn't something we get from government. Freedom is something we have naturally. The question is, are we really living that way? Or have we simply traded one form of control for another? Contradictions of American freedom. Let's look at history, because history tells the truth about power and control. The American Revolution is often painted as a battle for freedom. The colonists were fed up with British taxes and restrictions, so they fought a war, declared independence, and won. But then what happened? They created a new government, one that imposed its own taxes, its own laws, its own restrictions. In essence, they replaced a king with a president and Congress. Does that sound like real freedom to you? And what about the Civil War? The southern states tried to secede, just like the colonists had done from Britain. They wanted sovereignty, control over their own land, their own trade, their own laws. But their secession was deeply entangled with slavery, which violated the core libertarian principle of individual freedom. The North, meanwhile, claimed they were fighting to preserve the Union. But let's be honest, the Union was preserved through force, war, and destruction. So what's the lesson here? Governments, whether British, American, Northern, or Southern, always prioritize power over liberty. The battle for freedom is never really about which side wins. It's about whether the people being governed actually get to control their own lives. And historically, they don't, because as soon as one government collapses, another rises to take its place. Which brings us to the real question, can people ever truly be free if they're always being governed? Let's talk about secession, because this is where things get really interesting. Secession is usually treated like a radical, dangerous idea, but in reality, secession is simply the act of saying, I don't want to be part of this anymore. And if freedom is real, shouldn't that be a choice people can make? Think about it. If you're in a bad job, you can quit. If you're in a toxic relationship, you can leave. If you don't like a certain store or restaurant, you can take your business elsewhere. But when it comes to government, leaving isn't an option. You are forced to obey laws, pay taxes, and follow rules, even if you don't agree with them. And if you try to leave, you're labeled a criminal, a radical, or worse, a traitor. Why? Because governments survive by forcing people to participate. If people could truly opt out, power structures would collapse. That's why secession is such a threat, not because it's dangerous, but because it proves that freedom and government cannot coexist. And if that's true, then the only way to truly be free is to walk away. At this point, some of you might be thinking, well, at least in a democracy, we get to vote for our leaders. But let's break that down. What does voting actually do? It allows a majority to decide which representative will enforce rules for everyone. It ensures that whoever wins still has the power to control people's lives. And if you don't like the laws, too bad. The system says you have to follow them. So is that really freedom? Or is it just a more complicated way of controlling people? Because in the end, democracy still forces people to obey a system they may not agree with. That's why libertarianism argues that real freedom isn't about choosing who governs you. It's about choosing whether to be governed at all. So where do we go from here? How do we reclaim real liberty in a world that demands obedience? The answer isn't in elections. It isn't in revolutions. It's in rethinking the way we live. What if we stopped relying on government for protection and started relying on ourselves? What if we engaged in voluntary trade instead of forced taxation? What if we built communities based on mutual respect rather than government control? This is the kind of world libertarianism envisions. A world where peace and order come from voluntary cooperation, not laws in force. But before that world can exist, people have to start talking about it. And that's where you come in. Think, talk, challenge the system. Because if we never question what we've been told, we will always be ruled. And maybe, just maybe, it's time for something different. Thank you for listening to Think and Talk Libertarian. If this conversation sparked something in you, share it. Start discussions. Wear your beliefs out loud. Because in the end, true liberty starts with people willing to talk about it. I'll see you next time. Until then, stay free.